Hello, NFT land, denizens of Web3 and metaverses everywhere. I'm CreatoriousRex. We're back with the TWINN this week in NFT news because there's always a lot of news in NFT land, even now in the so-called recession. And I'm going to do this conversation the way I do every week with my good friend, Skot Leach. Hey, Scott.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing really well. We had
Right.
the unique opportunity to meet in person just a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
And I'll tell everybody my key takeaway from Veecon was COVID, but that's another conversation for another day. Um, and so we're going to talk about Veecon. We're going to talk about market data. We have a lot of charts to share because we just finished up the month of May. So we always look back and see how things are trending. I've got some pretty cool OpenSea data that I think is instructive of the larger market. And then we've got a few things around brands or something with F1, a movie that's being funded by NFTs, a couple other things. So, and we have NFTs in the law. That might need to be a new segment. Okay,
Yeah.
so if you want to also be charged with wire fraud and money laundering, we know how to do it. We know how to get the FBI to knock on your door and say they're there to help you. But let's talk about Veecon. Okay,
Yeah.
so you and I have known each other for a while, never met in
Yes.
IRL because we're friends from pandemic era. So that
Hmm.
was really fun. Um,
Yeah.
but it wasn't just you and I meeting. Like we've met a lot of people there. How many people were there, do you think?
I heard around just over 6,000.
Yeah, that seems about right. 5 to
Yeah.
7, it
Yeah.
seems about right. An incredible venue in the football stadium that the Minnesota Vikings
Hmm.
play in Minneapolis. I've never been to a conference in that type of venue. It was really
Yeah.
interesting the way they had it set up. The breakout rooms were kind of difficult. It wasn't the logistics weren't that great for the
Yeah.
tracks, but the main stage was pretty awesome.
It was. I actually really liked that it was in the stadium. I heard some comments. Even Gary said, this maybe it's overkill, but it created a nice sense of space. Like you could move around and you could sort of congregate. Yeah, I dug it.
Yeah,
I had
you
never
did
been to
not.
Minneapolis either. It was cool.
Oh yeah, Minneapolis, nice town. You did not have to be in the crowd if you didn't wanna be. Like, usually
Yes.
you go to these conferences, and if you wanna go to a session, you're shoulder to shoulder, you can go up
Mhm.
in the stands. There was one guy who had his own section, it's
Mhm.
like, you could move around, and I thought it was great that they allowed people to do that and didn't just
Yep.
record them. And, maybe that's a sign of our times.
Mhm.
Um, maybe it was good planning on their part, or maybe they just got lucky, but I really liked it. Now, I had a few takeaways from it. So,
Mhm.
I will say that clearly everyone was talking about NFTs, but the content was less important than the people.
Yes.
Um, the um, that it was really meeting people that you only knew from online or that you hadn't seen in years or something like that. Just connecting with other people, talking about what they were doing, I think was the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really did feel like it was setting the stage for future events. Like here are the people in the space. Here's how they're thinking about it. We're all getting together to talk about this stuff. It felt like yeah, like people coming together just to kind of, like you said, meet and sort of, I guess, set the tone, I think, for future events. And I feel like that's what Gary was trying to do too with a lot of his talks. And yeah, th- that whole team, I think, did a fantastic job of picking a really diverse sort of group of speakers from um, uh, hardcore folks who have been in space for a while to celebrities who are doing things in the space. I just thought it was a really neat to Deepak Chopra to Logan Paul, just a crazy mix of folks. And I think that that's important because when something's new like this, getting lots of perspectives is good. Otherwise, you sort of get stuck in your lane, whether it be NFTs or DeFi or coins or whatever, or even specific NFT projects or blockchains. anyway, I really liked the way they their choices there.
Yeah, and Gary addressed this. I think it was around the time when he first listed the speakers, and people were like, "Who are these celebrities? Who are these like
Hmm.
people like jumping into our space?" And his point was that we need to expand the space. It needs to be NFTs don't need to be this little niche enclave. It needs to be everything. And in order for it
Yeah.
to be everything, you have to bring in the other parts of
Yes.
the world, particularly the media world, which he's very deep in. So
Absolutely.
I will say
Yeah.
though, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I mean, I was one of these. I like to think that I'm pretty sort of open and whatnot to different ideas and perspectives. But if you're in a space early on and then you see people coming in, there's this tendency to kind of gatekeep, right? Like, oh, well, you're a tourist. Like, we've been here doing this. After that show, I got to say, like, a lot of the people that have been in the space for a while that are still just speculating and talking about how much their bag is worth and aren't really doing much more than that. Like, some of these celebs, the Stoner Cats project, like Mia Kunis and what's going on there, like that, they showed real content that looked good. Like, a lot of
Yeah.
these celebrities are creating actual content and making things. So that was really cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you were going to say
So
something. I
I think,
interrupted you.
there are a couple things. No, that's all right. A couple of things. Well, actually, I was going to say something as well. Trey, I went to an NFT conference and a self-help seminar broke out. There was a lot of like, I don't know, motivational
Yeah.
speakers, and like I think even the core NFT people were talking. A lot of them were really trying to pump people up a little bit, and it was really interesting. I think it was well received, but
Hmm.
almost unnecessary because what we could have said is like pure recession. This happened, right? NFT
Yeah.
recession. I think everybody was like,
Yeah.
wait, prices were way down. Ethereum prices were down. Top line
Yeah.
prices, everything was down. And yet it was just so optimistic. Like nobody
Yeah. It
there was
really was.
lamenting their bag being lower priced. They were all just excited
No.
about where we've been and where we're headed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, there were a few points where speakers brought up like, "Oh, I know it's rough right now." Yeah, I think everyone, to your point, was already pretty upbeat about it. But in general, the emphasis on the sort of inclusiveness of all the speakers of like, this isn't about, one group consuming content and one group making it. This is about everyone coming together to build together, whether they're collecting or making art or writing smart contracts. I thought that was really neat. And also, pardon me, the emphasis on art and artists and authenticity, that I think was huge. So many conferences I go to are about technology and kind of tactical, like, oh, here's how you should market your project, or here's how you should use Twitter, and here's how this algorithm works. It's not about, it always feels a little empty.
Yeah, there
That,
were no mechanics. Right?
yeah,
There were no
exactly.
tactics like how to do this, how to do that. It was
Yeah.
the stories of the artists. It was the stories of the projects. There were a few things around different types of providers, telling about like where they came from, what role they play. But there was no technical minutia, nothing like that. It was very at a high level. So if you went there to learn about NFTs, you came away with stories of people in
Hmm.
NFT world. You
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
really come away necessarily learning. And that's okay. That's knowing your audience. Like that audience already knew NFTs.
Hmm.
Except for
Hmm.
a couple people I sat next to for the opening session, who basically their cousin had just given them tickets, and they
Hmm.
were
Yeah.
really brand new, but they're big Gary Vee
Yeah.
fans, so they wanted to be there. Um, the the other thing that I thought was really interesting is the venue being Minneapolis and not New York City. In New York City, anytime you're there, like people are only partially at the conference
Hmm.
because there's so many other things to do. They're seeing their
Hmm.
college roommates,
Hmm.
maybe they're catching a show, they're going to the Knicks game or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, there's not that much else to do. I mean, like going on in Minnesota. I think the baseball team was out of town, so everybody was just there, and that meant people were really accessible.
Yes.
Uh,
Yep.
and and I thought that the pacing was really good for the sessions. And so but afterwards, like you had a chance to talk to the people who were
Mhm.
on the stage or the side stages. And so I thought that was really a pretty great feature of this event. I don't know if it'll be like that next year, but it
Yeah.
seemed to have a different feel than other conferences I've been to.
Yeah, the closest thing I could, compare it to for me was it felt a lot like South by Southwest in a way, and I think because South by Southwest does a lot of the same, they have all the panels, but also it's a mix of different things, right? It's a music, uh, festival, there's a film
Yeah.
festival aspect to it, there's technology, so you get a really interesting mix of people, and this felt like that with so many different folks involved, and then it also had, like, a little bit of a music festival vibe or something, the
I
Ferris
think
wheel and the giant
yeah.
checkers, and whether or not you did any of that stuff, it helped to create an atmosphere that was really, it was neat. That was a Yeah, it didn't feel like a conference, it felt like something else.
That's true. I mean, because there were hangout areas, there are these
Mhm,
reclining, Adirondack chairs over to the side, so you could actually watch the whole conference, like, reclining in
mhm.
one of those. There were at least 5, cornhole setups,
Yep,
people were playing cornhole, like, throughout. So, that was good, and I think one of the things I like about that, it's like it wasn't taking itself too seriously,
yeah.
which is always a risk for something like this, particularly something big that's branded after the person who founded it, and there's a lot of money at stake, and it's a brave new world. You could it could have really been over the top very quickly.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Another observation I
What that
had that I thought was really interesting was the sort of communities within communities that you had these, I was part of that Hangout Hawks group because that was an NFT I held, so that group organized a party that I had a ticket to, and you came along with me, and then I kept hearing about stories like that of different V friends getting together with like V friends, whether they were gift goats or spectaculars or tigers or whatever. And then you saw it with just the merch people were wearing, right? Someone's wears a mutant ape shirt and sees someone else with the same shirt or something mutant ape, and they fist bump or they start talking, and you had these neat little like groups forming, and they had a kind of automatic rapport, right? That happens at conferences anyway. If you're at a sales conference, you're with salespeople, so you have a place to start a conversation. But here there was it skipped to a more sort of closer relationship. It was interesting to see
absolutely.
that happen. I heard so much afterwards from folks on Twitter and all over saying how the sort of friendships they formed during that time. Anyway, it was neat. I thought that was good. That was really cool to observe.
Yeah, it was. In fact, my recommendation to anybody who goes next year, don't wear VCon paraphernalia because that just everyone knows you're already at VCon. You can wear that when you go to NFT NYC maybe, and then people will say, "Oh, you went to VCon." But while you're there, wear a t-shirt or jacket from your tribe, which is some NFT project that you're involved in, because it's a huge social lubricant. I mean, most
Yeah.
people there are pretty savvy. They knew a lot of the projects, at least the major projects. So they would they would either say, "I'm part of that," or "I wish I was part of that," or "Tell me about that." And yeah, the ape paraphernalia, atom bomb, both really well.
Yeah.
Um,
Danny Cole stuff, that was a great example, I thought, because
Creature
he
world,
was he was present and speaking and also just attending parties and talking to lots and lots of people.
yes,
And lots of people were wearing, not lots of people, but some people were wearing creatures stuff. And you see a lot of bored apes things, but the creatures things you spot it immediately. And that was yeah, to your advice, like if there's a project you're really passionate about, um, it's a good opportunity to meet folks in that community and even people that are responsible for creating that community.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, and we got time to or we got a chance to spend some time with Danny. What a
Mhm.
tremendous human being he is. Obviously really innovative, but fun, fun guy. Okay, so let's talk about market data. I put a wrap on the VCon piece. All
Yeah.
right, so the first thing I thought I would do is we talk about Ethereum because they've got good APIs, they do a lot of volume, and they're somewhere between 60 and 70% of all NFT trading still. So maybe even more now that we've gone into the recession, because it tends to, focus more on sort of the bigger projects. But you can ignore that really big spike in the middle. That's other deed sales, all that activity there. But if you just look at forget about those 2 days there and just look at what we're seeing. Over the last several weeks, so that's the last 3 weeks of May, you can see that the daily volume in Ethereum is considerably lower than what you would consider to be a best fit line or an average across. So if you're feeling there's an NFT recession, you're justified in that sentiment based on the data.
Yes. But this is still weird. And it's probably weird to me because I don't know enough about when we get to finance and numbers, I struggle, or I look for random correlations. So there's something about, for me, I can wrap my head around the price of a coin like ETH as it relates to the US dollar. And I can wrap my head around the price of an NFT as it relates to the coin. But when I try and comprehend both at once, I start to it gets tricky because we have like two moving pieces at the same time. So it's hard to tell how they're playing off one another. Example being like last year in March or in May, when ETH took a dive, NFTs were going bananas. So if you were deep in NFTs, at least speaking for myself, I didn't even look at the price of ETH. I just looked at NFTs because that's where my mind was focused. I don't know what that has to do with anything. It's just a random observation.
No, well, actually, the next chart's going to show this. I'll just show this one really quickly. So we think it's a big recession, but still did 2.5 billion in total volume in May. So even though those numbers looked a lot lower, those daily, this is the Ethereum, the total dollar value of Ethereum that was traded, right? But look at this. This is NFTs sold. So what this tells us is that the volume of NFT sales has actually been pretty consistent throughout the year. I mean, obviously January was big, but you just look at this little oscillating effect we're getting: February, March, April, May.
Yep.
And what this tells me, given what we just saw in terms of the monthly and daily volume, is that these are going at a lower price. So the value of Ethereum has come down. The value of the NFTs has come down, and that's helping keep up volume a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's not like all's not terrible here.
Yeah, no, I don't. I sort of like it when it's like this, which is, it makes more sense to me. I can kind of start thinking more clearly about projects. And this was another thing that came up at Veecon, and I'm hearing across the board right now is like, okay, it got crazy. It got speculative. We've talked about this a lot. And now that we're in this recession or bear market, it's time to start building stuff. And I think that we've been talking about utility for a long time, but like, it's time to stop saying that word and start demonstrating how these things are going to be used. And for as much shit as like, I guess Gary doesn't get shit, but I hear some bigger projects being like, oh, well, it's VeeFriends. That's probably going to be the biggest NFT conference forever, unless Gary backs off of it. And it's not going anywhere. That was a big piece of utility they gave. And the fact that afterwards they told us that our tickets are going to have more utility, like he's really demonstrating what this stuff can do in real time. Anyhow, yeah, I'm excited what this means in terms of like starting to actually get to the next evolution and make some more meaningful projects.
Yeah, and a little alpha that you hinted at there, the tickets for Veecon, they actually spiked while Snoop Dogg was on stage because apparently Gary and Snoop are going to do a collaboration later this year, and to get on the whitelist, I assume you're going to have a Veecon ticket. So that gives those Veecon tickets. Those are would no longer be viewed as valuable. Like the utility is gone. Those were NFTs that were dropped to token holders, basically saying, "Here's your ticket for this year." Now it has some artistic value. Snowfro did
Sure.
it. He did a generative piece.
Yep.
Snowfro, one of the more famous generative artists in the space right now, founder of Art Blocks. So there's that, but the specific utility really wasn't there anymore. But now you have this this idea that you might be able to get access to a Snoop Dogg NFT as a
Yep.
result. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it is. He mentioned that mentioned early on that, oh, you'll get to keep the ticket after. Like, imagine he cited some example of a Super Bowl one ticket stub selling for something,
Yeah.
some high. But this is the power of NFTs is the fact that because they can exist forever, as a creator, you can call back to these things and use them again for
Yes.
for all sorts of stuff we haven't really imagined yet. It's cool.
Okay. So active traders on Ethereum let's bring this up on the screen. So that's May over there to the right. So it has gone down. Essentially, you see a nice straight line decrease
Mhm.
from January through May. What we'll have to see is what goes on with June, but I think we're looking at maybe a summer slump, June, July. Maybe we come back in August like last year. We'll see. But I think the fact is, even though there is a recession, there's a lot of people who traded at least one NFT
Yeah.
last month, and the total users. This is the total registered users on OpenSea. Actually, the total registered users who have done at least one transaction continues to rise. We're almost at
Hmm.
1.75 million.
Yep.
So even though like it's a bad month, there's new people coming on all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I've actually noticed it happens in waves, but the last few days I've gotten people who have watched crypto from the sidelines, NFTs and coins in general, reach out to me and say, "Is now a good time to get into it?" Um, which is really, really interesting to me. So I think we might see a whole. I know, unfortunately, there's a lot of folks that got in last year after everything went up, and it's just rough right now for those people.
Yeah.
But now we're back to that sort of. It's like 2018 after the first crypto winter. I think yeah. I think lots of people are starting to look at it who hadn't previous. It'll be curious to see what happens.
A lot of altcoins went to zero. A lot of NFT projects going
Hmm.
to zero, but
Hmm.
some is sort of working their way through, and a new
Yep.
time to build, as you talked about. Another thing I just thought of say, okay, so we have this curve, from October is very steep, right? 500,000, 1.5 million.
Hmm.
I also have the Polygon users through OpenSea.
Hmm.
Not as steep, right? It's still
Hmm.
um, over a million users.
Yep.
Um, so what I think we're seeing is like since September, right? The other chart had more months, so it looks a little bit looks what we see is like a steady stream of people getting pulled over into the space.
Hmm.
The other thing is with Polygon, you see the same downward trajectory, right? So we
Hmm.
saw January through May, up little ups and downs in February and March. Um, and then we have this a fairly similar type of thing where the daily trading you see is much lower when we get
Yep.
into May than the average. So, we're seeing Polygon really track very closely. Um, but we have this other thing that's like total NFT sold. This is interesting to me because it's such a steep drop off and it's continued. So we'll want to see what this looks like. One of the reasons I was looking at this is I think there's a real risk that um, that Polygon was a novelty in that it might people were using it for, and they're still using it for certain types of things. But there's not as many of those things, I think, going on out there right now. And so we're going to see less activity. And my concern is that, well, I don't know if it's really a concern. My thought is that it might be forgotten. In particular, if we get to, we'll talk later about like gas being just a couple of dollars right now.
Mhm.
So that removes one of the big benefits of using the layer 2. And we also are, expecting the Ethereum update later this year. Looks like it might be end of the year as opposed to the summer. But that should bring prices down further. And so then the rationale for Polygon might go away. I don't know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think another factor here that I've observed in my own sort of pattern of behavior is Solana came along and did a lot of stuff really well. I think that my that I perceive Polygon was trying to do, which are a lot of games on Solana. I'm also noticing a lot of investment by VCs and third parties into companies developing on Solana. So it sounds like there's a lot of runway there for folks to be building. And just over the last month or so, starting to see Solana projects, NFT projects get real traction. I'd been dabbling in that stuff late last year and it was kind of flat. But ever since OpenSea made the announcement that they're going to allow Solana purchases, there's been some projects that have broken out. If you sort Solana or OpenSea's rankings, you'll see some Solana stuff in there. Now, they had an outage yesterday, so that's a little wonky, but I'm wondering if that's contributing to Poly's.
I think it's a really good assessment. In fact, if we just stacked some of these things on top of each other, maybe you'd see that some of that decline
Yeah.
and Polygon's coming from Solana. This is the daily trading. There's not a long period of time since Solana has been available on
Yeah.
OpenSea. You can see it's very hit driven. I
Yeah.
don't think this is like a really good gauge of what's going on in Solana with NFTs because most of the Solana activity in NFTs is on Solana, like Magic
Yeah.
Eden,
Yeah.
things like that.
Yep.
But I think this is interesting that certain sets of projects are tapping into this.
Mhm.
You can look at the total transactions, looks actually a little bit better. So some of those
Mhm.
dollar values of Solana going down are a function of Solana crashing in
Mhm.
terms of value. But the transactions, this looks like a general upward trend line. We'll see what happens this month.
Yeah.
And then daily active traders, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,700 to 3,500 per
Yep.
day in late April and early May. So there's some activity there. I'm not sure yet how to interpret the Solana data from OpenSea. I think I'd rather just have pure
Yeah.
Solana data, but I thought I'd throw that in there because I thought we were going to be talking about things like Polygon and Solana.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I think a big factor here is, and we've talked about this before, but what Solana has done a good job of, well, what a lot of projects on, how am I trying to say this? The user experience is better across the board. So if I use the Phantom wallet and I use Magic Eden to purchase NFTs, one, it's very fast. So we know that Ethereum's gotten better, and to your point, gas fees are down. But if you're used to internet speed and then you go to buy an NFT and it doesn't happen instantly, that is a little bit of a jarring experience and unsettling until you get used to it. Solana is a lot easier, I think, for first-time users to dabble in and actually do things without, even with ETH costs at a few bucks to move something. On Solana, it's like cents, right? So you can
Yeah.
actually make a lot of mistakes without feeling like you got completely burned. So I do think that user experience is starting to going to play a factor, especially as new users come in. Obviously, OpenSea, MetaMask, Ethereum, that's all getting better across the board, but it feels like a lot of the Solana stuff, they made a little bit of a leap right out of the gate to improve that user experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. Okay, so let's move on. I just sum that up by saying Yeah, it doesn't look great right now, but it probably is not as bad as you thought it was. If you just look at the data, there's still a ton of activity out there, which means there's some liquidity. It's just
Mhm.
the prices are lower for right now, and that maybe they'll be permanent. I don't know. Maybe it's just a reset. We see those sometimes in the stock market, for example, or other asset classes. Everything's down, and then like back to slow growth, or it could just be, people are just waiting for the next thing. What I'm particularly interested in is how the inflationary bite is going to affect this. I think it's certainly going to
Yeah,
constrain growth of new users. I don't know that it's going to eliminate a lot of existing
yeah,
NFT holders, but
yeah,
with inflation, you would expect people to have less disposable income and therefore less to spend on things like NFTs, which last time I checked
yeah.
are not a necessity for human life.
No, but I do wonder about this is pure just I have very little data to support this, but we know that there's a lot of folks in the space that didn't necessarily put a lot of US dollars or fiat into it, but were in the right place at the right time and have NFTs that are valued at astronomical amounts of ETH. Are those people ever going to cash out, or do they keep their chips? Do they stay in the casino, so to speak? And they might sell their NFTs, but they keep their ETH and they keep moving it around.
Yeah.
Or is this a situation where, I don't know those individuals' scenario, if they're going to, cash out and pay their bills and feed
It's
themselves.
they might have to. I mean, it's a tough time to
Yeah,
cash out with Ethereum under 2,000 as we record this. Um,
yeah. What
Particularly
I
when we've seen it, 2,500 to 4,000 over most of the last year.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that I mean, look, not financial advice at all, and I don't know when this is gonna happen, but my take based on the experiences I've had up to this point with technology and whatnot is that it's going to go back up. It's inevitable. Um, the coin piece, the NFT piece is still a mystery to me because some of the behavior that we see is very strange, and wholly new to me. Uh, but I also see the massive potential of it, and I think it's at a sort of point where it's up to the holders to really decide if these things w what they want out of it, right? Is it
Yeah,
a store of value, or is it a something that actually provides utility, or is it a community? What are these things? It's gonna be really interesting to see how that evolves in light of everything that's going on and all these other outside factors. Um,
yeah, absolutely. I don't know the answer to that, but there's clearly a shakeout going on.
mhm.
And a lot of the people you mentioned roadmaps who were talking about utility last fall when they came out have delivered none of it. And there's the idea of the fast rug, the slow rug, and just the incompetence. But I think my speculation is that now's the time for longer term activities, which
Mhm.
is not like community projects as much, more artist led projects because the artists are going to be around for
Yeah.
decades. It matters to them. Now, an artist can do the exact same thing. An independent artist who's doing their own work can do the
Mhm.
exact same thing as a PFP artist on a team can do, right? They can just walk away. But
Yeah.
it's a little bit harder if this is the thing that you're trying to build your career around. And I think that there are definitely some people who are, saying that, hey, I'm going to be doing this for 10, 20, 30 years or something like that. And so in that case, then, if you think there's a decent chance that it'll grow and you like the stuff, having the stuff in your wallet, it's a good time to pick up, some stuff from NFT fine artists.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, here's the other thing about artists is like artists are always making new stuff. So just because they make some NFTs and then do something else, that doesn't make those NS and the previous art they made any less valuable. So yeah, I'm always bullish on artists. I think that artists don't ever stop making art. That's the thing. Like they don't.
Well, and it all depends too. What's your objective? Like, is your objective to be part of a project because there's great utility, because you want to own that piece of artwork
Yeah.
because you like the art, or you at some point you want to convert it to a physical piece?
Yes.
Is it just to make money? And like all the above are things that are in the space. The big
Oh,
money moving
absolutely.
around is really probably that third thing. People are hoping to make money, but I would say that art. People say art is a good investment, and I'd say that's not true. I think certain art is a good investment.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's hard for me because I have bias because that's the world I came from. Yeah, it's tricky. I think this came up at VCon too, right? Intention. Like, what's your intention here as a collector, as a creator of a project? Um, I think when when the money gets crazy and we talk about floors and things like that, it's easy to lose perspective on why any of this was exciting to begin with, and it all just becomes it gets tricky. So for me, art is always just art and artists is a really good way for me to stay centered and to yeah,
Yeah.
I dig it.
Yeah, well, I think everybody be benefit a little bit by having one or two pieces from fine artists, and then we'll see how it plays out. I
Yeah.
suspect there are going to be some artists who are maybe pretty successful in the physical world, who are going to get into NFTs, and they will abandon whatever the project is. They'll say
Oh
it's
yeah.
just art.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care if nobody wants it, whatever. But I think there's this expectation that if the artist is successful, like is deemed successful, um, the value will probably go up, and you'll be happy to hold it in your wallet. So,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
this is a very risky asset class. If you're trying to do this
Mhm.
hoping to make money off of it over whatever time frame you want to talk about, I think it's a really risky asset class because there is no reason to believe that an artist isn't going to um, become a national pariah in any given moment, and like everyone starts burning their NFTs because they don't want to have any association with the person, or they just
Yeah.
go off into obscurity, or they never make it, or
Yeah.
uh, like there's a lot of risk here. I mean, this is one of the reasons to buy dead artists, right? Because like they're not going to do anything really to screw it up at this point.
Yeah.
So in any event, those are just a
But
couple.
those are yeah, there's stuff like this, whenever I talk like this, people shake their head like I'm insane, but, like, technology moves extremely fast, and everyone likes to make fun of, like, "Oh, right click and save, and it's a JPEG," like, there is a future where an NFT might be 3D printed into a David quality statue that was
Oh, yeah,
that
sure.
artist's intention, that it the digital thing may technology may enable the digital thing to become a physical thing again in the future. Um, anyway, what I love about artists and investing in art is one, you're helping to support someone and their passion, which is just huge for me, and it's incredibly satisfying. Two is there's the investment piece, but you're funding someone making something. You're not funding someone figuring out how to take another slice of someone else's thing they made. And I know we need middlemen in the world, middle people, but like we also need people making stuff, and artists make stuff, and that matters.
You would want more of the value to accrue to the creator,
Yes.
than is largely the case in the world today. And so this is
Yeah.
why NFTs are amazing, because it's direct to consumer,
Yes.
and in a way that other industries really benefited from throughout Web 1 and Web 2, but art largely did not. And so this is an opportunity for that to
Yeah.
change. Although, I think the jury's out whether it'll, ultimately accrue a lot of value to a lot of artists. It certainly accrued
Mhm.
a lot of value to a few artists so far, and then we'll see.
That is absolutely true. Um,
Uh, okay, so let's move on. So that's been a good discussion, but we do want to talk about NFTs and the law. And this comes up because of this gentleman, Nate Chastain, who was product manager at OpenSea. Generally speaking, I think has been well liked in the industry, but got into a little bit of trouble because some people figured out that he was using multiple wallets to purchase NFTs before they were listed on the homepage of OpenSea. He was the person who decided which NFTs were listed on the homepage of OpenSea. He would buy them. They would be promoted on the front page to just raise awareness. That was a signal to some people that, oh, this is an artist or project that's going to pop. Immediately there was a lot of trading activity, or there was interest in buying available things which Nate owned through one of his wallets, or allegedly owned through one of his wallets, and then he would sell them for a cool profit, making 10,000 and more on these like little transactions, 10,000 US equivalent, and sometimes more. So he made money and recently got a knock from the FBI, and they have charged him with wire fraud and money laundering for his activity. And their statement was, NFTs may be new, but this behavior is not new. We see this in a lot of other places.
Yeah. It's funny because if you've been in this space for a while, you know that like this is shady, but there's way shadier stuff going on. So it's a little bit startling in that way, but at the same time, like I think there's probably more going on here than we know about. But this is something that happens with new stuff, right? Like lots of opportunities come up and a space is new, and it's easy for people to take advantage of those opportunities. And I think it's also easy for people to tell themselves a story of why it's good or bad. I don't know much about this, Nate as a person or an individual, or what his intention or motivation was behind this. I'm assuming that because the FBI looked at it, there's probably some stuff that's pretty bad, outside of just the obvious piece. But yeah, this is, it's new space, and this is what happens, even with established spaces, right? Like scams everywhere. But the fact that someone that's helping to build it is doing it it's unfortunate.
Now he departed from OpenSea shortly after this came to light. I think it was November. A couple people just looked at transaction records on the blockchain, tied it back to him, said something. I think he admitted it, that he was doing something along these lines, maybe not all the things that he's accused of. But he resigned and then moved on. And I should say that there's people in the industry who spoke very favorably of him. There's plenty of people who spoke unfavorably of this as well. But as you said, like it's there's other things that are going on in the space which are equally bad, maybe worse. That doesn't excuse this, but I think the larger question here is for people is they think this Web3 space is completely outside of everything that we know, but we live in this larger societal structure, and they have institutions and rules and frameworks in place that they're now applying to this. And so people might say, well, why wire fraud? Well, so for the first thing is like anything that's conducted over a wire. So it could be a phone. That was originally what it was called, or what it was developed for. That's the law, but it was extended to the internet. And guess what? Blockchains run on the internet. So there is existing law that can deal with any type of fraud, which, I think this is, think of this as one example of fraud in the NFT space. And then money laundering, I was just asked this. I assume that's because he was using multiple wallets to try to obscure his identity, and he was moving the funds around, but I'm not positive. But in any event, you are not. It's not like there's no laws applicable to this space. There are laws that people are going to apply to this space, and they might not be able to be very elegantly applied, but they'll do it nonetheless because that's what institutions do. They just keep moving forward.
Yeah, and those they need to apply them in order to understand how they need to be adjusted to this new space because it's new, right? Everyone gets uptight about any sort of oversight, right? Like, hey, this is ours, stay away from it, keep your hands off it, stop trying to take from us. But everyone needs to agree to a set of rules. Like we all need to play by the same rules. And when it starts to get abstract and people start behaving in ways that are not good, if we all start doing that, that's a problem. Like human beings, we're really good at thinking that we know between right and wrong, but we're also really good at collectively making bad decisions for a long time and doing terrible things to each other for a long period of time before we realize like, oh, hey, maybe torturing people is not good. Maybe we should try and be better to one another. So I do think that having a shared sort of set of rules is important. Now, the idea of someone coming up and disrupting a space I've been working in and have a lot of my life tied up in is scary, but I think that that's also important. It's just a balancing act. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, so just I guess it's just a warning to folks out there that something that might seem like a good idea, everybody's trying to get an edge, everyone's looking for that alpha. You might run up against existing laws. So just,
Yes.
think twice. We tell people to
Yeah.
think twice before they get scammed by a fraud or something like that. Think twice before you do
Yep.
something that might be viewed as fraud.
And be honest about your intentions. Like, really ask yourself why you're about to post what you're going to post. I post a lot about projects I'm excited about because I love the art and the artists. But this definitely puts things into perspective. Like, oh, I need to make sure that this doesn't appear that I'm trying to pump up something I hold. Is the fact that I never sell anything is probably a good thing. But yeah,
Yeah.
we
A
have
lot
to
of, lot of,
learn.
a lot of influencers out there finally getting
Yeah.
some shade online for basically using their audience as their own liquidity.
Yes.
They pump
Yes.
it and then they get out of it, and then they're like, "Oh, well, you should have gotten out of it. Like, I was just rebalancing my portfolio," or like, "I still believe in the project," or "You should have gotten out of it soon. I told people to get out of it," or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, even when you're not doing it in a way that's for your own personal gain or benefit, when you're just enthusiastically talking about stuff. I had this last year where I was excited about NFTs and had family and friends asking me about it. And then later, like, oh, hey, I got a wallet. Like, I bought this thing. Should I buy this? It's like, whoa, I wasn't suggesting you should do any of those things. So understanding that not only is it bad if you're using it and immoral and you may get arrested for doing it for personal gain, it's also dangerous to introduce something to someone who may take your word as gospel and lose a lot of money in the process. Just I don't know. Think about your intentions and the words you're using.
Fair enough. All right, let's move on to brands and NFT lands. We have Vogue here. They are selling 3 covers, images of covers of Vogue. These are, I think they're listed, they're hung and maybe listed elsewhere, but they're hung in the Singularity Gallery in Decentraland, where they have a lot of famous artwork. So I don't know if they paid a placement fee here, but this is Vogue Portugal. I just thought it was very interesting that they've got the 3 different pieces. I think 2 of them are selling for 1 ETH and 1 for maybe with a reserve of 2 or 3. But very interesting that you've got a big publisher, and this would make sense to me. I mean, because these magazines, they're 2 things. They're ads and they're the cover, right? I mean, most of them are not really about the content in between the pages or the cover and back. So there's no question to me that uh, this is artwork, and I could see why people would want to own it.
Yeah, this is really interesting to me. I have just a love for magazines because that used to be how you sort of consumed niche content you were into, right? You could go online, but before mobile, like finding a magazine about filmmaking or art or fishing or whatever you happen to be into, it still exists, but it's nothing like it used to be. This is cool to me. It has like a nostalgic feel. It is art. I also think there's some neat things they could do, to use the utility word again. Like if I paid a lot for one of these, do I get like a lifetime subscription to Vogue? Like, can I see some digital version of the articles each month? I think there's neat stuff. This could bring up like a whole resurgence of a magazine like experience, I think.
Yeah,
Who knows?
you think about communities, right? Magazines are
Mhm.
about communities. They're interest-based communities, basically. Now, this is a
Yeah. Yeah.
Vogue is more general. It's about fashion, which touches a lot more folks than maybe model train building or something like that. But yeah, I mean, they already have communities of interest. It would make sense to do something like that.
Yep. Yep.
All right, so we have another brand element. This is Formula One, the Amber Room, which runs parties basically for Formula One Grand Prix. and they are selling, I think it's about 1,900 tokens, and then there's 30 which are set aside. So there's like an exclusive thing. So they have these parties at all the F1 races. So if you're a big F1 person, I think you are going to be interested in having access to this space. And then there's 30 for like the billionaires. I don't know the pricing. I didn't see anything listed and how much it's going to cost, but it is invitation only. So there's word out there that this thing exists. But until we see that trading on secondary, I might not know exactly what the market clearing price is, which I guess is always the case. But I think this is really interesting. They're tying to a big brand in real life events, lifetime membership to this club, to the extent that I don't know how long a lifetime is when you're talking about who throw parties at F1 events, but there you go.
Yeah, this is neat. This is kind of, I'm just like so tired of saying the word utility because it sounds so empty now, but this is really cool, right? If you're back, this is a thing that people are hardcore into. It's not like a passive, like, oh, I'm sort of into that. Like if you're into this, you're into it. And this is probably a really big deal for you. I like this. I think it's I think this is the type of stuff we're going to start to see a lot of more and more and more.
And these people are spending a lot of money right now to go because they're traveling to Monaco. I think was last week. They travel to Rio, Austin, Texas, London.
Yeah.
I mean, so they go all over the world. So they're already dropping a lot of money, and basically to have a place to hang out that's somewhat exclusive. It's like country
and
club move.
Yeah, and a curated experience. That's something I feel like is missing now in this. We sort of went, Web 2 came out, and now we have this notion of a feed, and our lives is about this feed where we're consuming content via a feed, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, and the feed is tailored to us and designed to make us keep clicking and looking and enjoying. And I'm not bashing that because I think there's fantastic things about it, and there's terrible things about it, and it is what it is. But we've gotten away from a kind of curated singular experience, and I think part of that was COVID in a way, where we've been stuck at home. But this idea that you can go out into the world and have something like this that's so specific to something you're passionate about and goes really deep is I think we're sort of missing that and longing for that. And if you have shitloads of money and that's what you're into, like, what else are you going to do? It makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, they could just charge like a cover fee at the gate, but like basically they're turning it into a membership club, and it just happens to have an NFT as opposed to some other thing. So I think it's a clever idea. We'll see how much money they raise. We'll come back to that one. I think that's going to be an interesting one to look at, but seeing a lot more of these IRL in real life event type of things using NFTs. So that's certainly popular right now. Will it be popular a year from now? I don't know, but certainly it's popular right now. I am interested in this lifetime access thing. Like, how long do I live? And is your company around? Like, what is the fraud that's going on here? But for the near term, I think all the incentives are aligned between the buyers and the sellers. Last topic for today, Ethereum gas fees really low. We just mentioned that. They got down below $3 to buy an NFT. I know I had bought a couple while we were at Veecon, just low dollar ones. It was just things that I was interested in because the speakers were saying something about it. So I just wanted to buy. So I had something from their project. And I think I paid $12 once and $8 another time. So certainly you've been seeing that. This is a far cry from the 2.5 ETH people paid to mint other deeds for the Bored Ape Yacht Club other side Metaverse. Certainly less than the $800, $1,000 people were paying on a regular basis during some of the competitive mints, but also much higher than what we would normally think of as what might have been the average, like $100 to $150 per mint. Very commonly, if you were off hours, you might get 40 to 70. But we're talking about something that's like completely different. And I believe the answer is there's just less activity on the blockchain. But maybe there's something else. I don't know what your thoughts are and like what this means for the industry.
I mean, I think it's obviously it's good. If it's good if you're trading and you can take advantage of that. If it's a sign of things dropping, that's a bummer. I started to look into this. I thought there was a technical reason why this had improved a little bit, but I'm not going to say more on that because I don't know if that's the case or not. You're shaking your head like no, so
I don't think
maybe
it is. I
wrong.
don't.
Okay.
Well, maybe. But I think most of the proof of stake's not coming till later this year, so it certainly wasn't
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Obviously, people not engaging is a bummer, but low gas is good because it makes it easier to make moves. And if that was something that was holding you off, I guess the system
Yes.
sort of works in that way.
Absolutely. And if you ever thought that maybe you don't want all of your NFTs in one wallet or in one account, you want to spread them out a little bit,
Yeah.
really good time to do that.
Yeah. If you've been waiting to put stuff on a ledger,
Mhm.
yeah, lots of that.
All right, cool. I think that's it for
Right.
today. Scott, anything you would direct people to?
No, I wanted to talk about this painting behind me.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So back in March of 2021, so over a year ago, before Bored Apes or any of that stuff, when I was researching NFTs, I'd gotten into it a little bit before that, but I was really looking at artists again. Was just excited about the idea of that, and I found an artist. He's a street artist in Brazil, Clint XVX, and he had created some NFTs that I really liked, and I bought a few, and we formed a relationship over Twitter, and we talk now and then. And he was doing a physical show with some of his pieces, and that was one of them. And I sent him some Ethereum to purchase it, and he sent me the piece. And I just thought it was a cool story of like I discovered an artist through NFTs, got to meet that person, and then I bought a physical piece from them using Ethereum. Yeah, just neat. I'm excited about it. So check out their work, Clint XVX. Yeah,
I think that's great. I'm glad you brought that up. And it is,
yeah.
People wondered how the traditional art world and the NFT world might come together. And
Yep.
To date, there's been a lot of people who have succeeded in the in the traditional art world who have sold NFTs. So that seems like an obvious thing, using their fame and notoriety in order to sell the NFTs. There's been some other people who have been successful in NFTs that don't have any particular position in the real world in terms of notoriety. But I think you're right. It would make sense to me that NFTs, because they're borderless, because they're easily accessible, will probably be the entree into introducing new artists more often than walking in a museum.
Yeah, it's yeah, I just thought it was cool.
Absolutely. Okay. I'm CreatoriousRex. Find me on the Twitter at CreatoriousRex, at Skot Leach. I actually go to Niftorian.com, check out some of the things we're doing. We're going to do a little event for people who are artists looking to get into the NFT space, a little virtual conference. So look for that. We'll have news on that coming up very soon. Okay, everybody. Until next week, happy hunting.